What is my favorite TV show? You guys have to guess.
Yeah. Where did they go? Where did they go to grad school? What I learned in boarding school.
That's actually going to be your final exam. What I learned in Econ class is you have 3 blanks to fill in. Oh, speaking of SpongeBob, the other day was the 19th anniversary of the Bubble Bowl episode. Made me feel old as fuck.
I'm glad they actually did that in the last Super Bowl now. You can bully them enough to really it's a Super Bowl. I like it.
All right, so last time we ended with determinants of price elasticity of demand, right? You hit this slide? Yeah, I know we did the gasoline one. Okay. So if you're running a firm, if you're trying to decide how you want to price your products, you're going to have to consider the price elasticity of demand. So you might want to know why some goods have price elasticity of demand and some have low price elasticity of demand. So you can figure out, based on the characteristics of your good and the good it's competing, or the goods it's competing against, whether there's going to be a high elasticity or low elasticity. Because that'll determine if you can change your price and how you can price the good. So the first determinant is the availability of close substitutes. So in general, if you have a product and there are more substitutes available, there's more goods it's competing against, there will be a more elastic demand. Because if you raise your price too much, people can just go purchase one of those other products, and they've got a lot of different choices to go to. So there's not a lot of substitutes for gasoline. There's not much else you can put in your car you can make, use to make your car go. So the price elasticity of demand is going to be low. In general, you're basically stuck with gasoline. Oh yeah, remember this is what we talked about. Thank you. So if you want just a generic pair of sneakers, there's a lot of substitutes for Nike. You can get Reebok, Adidas, New Balance, whatever. So the price elasticity of demand is going to be high. So if Reebok increases their prices, people that just want regular pair of sneakers can go to Adidas, they can go to New Balance, whatever, and get those sneakers. So people are going to be a lot more sensitive to price for things when there's a lot of substitutes than when there's like very few substitutes. The next is the passage of time. This is pretty important. Sometimes it's called the second law of demand. That over time, people can adjust their buying habits a lot more easily. So in the long run, you're going to have a much higher elasticity than in the short run. So in the short run, it's a lot more difficult for people to switch products. Again, because we lack the knowledge of what other ones are good, whether it'll meet your need or not. So people are willing to pay that higher price in the short run. Also, if the price change is temporary, they think it'll come back down soon. Again, more likely to stick with that. And then for more expensive goods, there's a lot of work that goes into buying those goods besides just the cost that you're paying. You've got to, like if you're looking to buy a new house or to buy a new car, you have to put in a lot of research, take a lot of time to find a new one, in addition to that money that you're spending. In the shorter run, you're not just going to go and buy a new house because that's like half the distance to work just because gas went up a little bit. But if gas prices were increased, say by 50%, or say they double for a long period of time, then you would consider moving closer to cut down on that cost. So if the price of gas rises, as I said, it takes a long time for people to adjust their gasoline consumption. They may move close to work, they may buy a more fuel-efficient car. In the short run, it isn't too expensive to switch to public transit. So maybe that increases the elasticity some in the short run. But a lot of other substitutes for gasoline are going to be much longer run products that you're not going to buy in the short run. You'll buy them in the longer run if there's a long-term sustained price increase. Likewise, if the price of gas drops, it is just a little bit, or if it's just temporary, you're not going to buy a house out in the suburbs. You're not going to move farther away just because you can save a little bit of money, like the next like 2 months. You're going to need a much longer period of time if you're going to be willing to do that, to spend the money, to go through the whole process. The next is whether the good is a luxury or necessity. So people are a lot more flexible with what they're willing to pay for luxuries than for necessities. So for a luxury good, the price elasticity demand is going to be much higher than for a necessity. So people consider milk and bread necessities. Every time there's like a snowstorm, people go out and buy all the milk and all the bread possible for some reason. They're going to buy them pretty much regardless of price. So the price increases, the price doubles, people are going to keep buying milk and bread. Whereas, say for some reason, the price of yachts goes up by like 50%, maybe there's like a huge tax on it. Because that's a luxury, people can have fun other ways. Because they don't need to buy a yacht, a lot of people are going to forego buying a yacht and do something else, buy something else for fun. So for your luxury goods, people are going to be much, much more sensitive to price. Next, and this one's almost like cheating, is the definition of a market. So the more narrowly you define a market, the more substitutes there's available. So the more elastic demand's going to be. Likewise, if you define the market super broadly, there's going to be a lot fewer substitutes, so we're going to have more inelastic demand.
Morning class. That's double.
I'll call that a tie, because that was the exact same time.
Teamwork, man.
Yeah, so if you look at jeans, for example, if you think there's no good substitute for jeans, your demand for jeans is going to be very inelastic. You define the market very broadly, just like all jeans. But if you look at different brands of jeans, because there's a bunch of different brands that sell jeans, you may be a lot more sensitive to the price of a particular brand, because you can just go buy one of those other brands of jeans. But if you look at just jeans in general, and the price of jeans in general increases, you're going to still be willing to buy as many or almost as many jeans. Be much more elastic, much less responsive to change, the change in price. Another example is individual gas stations. So for individual gas stations, we're pretty sensitive to price. Every time I visit my parents and I go home, there's one gas station near their house that's like 7 cents cheaper than everywhere else. So I always go there. And they're not like a chain, it's just like a one-off gas station. I'm not really sure how they do it or why they do it. But I always go there. So my price elasticity demand for gas in general is pretty low. Not very sensitive to price, but for the individual gas stations, I'll drive a little bit out of my way to get a much cheaper price. So again, it all depends on how narrowly we define the market.
Do you think it's like the quality of the gas that they can have a price point like that?
I don't know, because gas is pretty much the same, like wherever you buy it from.
Like that's what I would think, but like there is this, like, because I'm from Canada and there is this thing going on with the company who, like, they were selling gas for like 11 cents cheaper, and they actually found out that like they were selling like watered down gas. So like
Literally watered down?
Yeah, like literally. So just be careful. Be careful if your car doesn't last that long.
Huh. That's interesting. We have to check that out.
Yeah.
Like my whole family gets their gas there. Alright, and the final determinant for price elasticity of demand is the share of a good in consumer's budget. So if a good's a very small portion of your budget, you're not going to be very sensitive to price. So something like table salt, you very rarely buy. You only spend like $1 or $2 a year on it. Even if the price doubles from $2 to $4, that's still nothing for you for an entire year. So it's not really going to affect how much you buy. But if you look at like a car, if you look at like a house, these like really furniture, these real expensive goods, if there's a price change because it's such a large portion of your yearly income and how much you're willing to spend for a year, a price change in that is going to affect how much you're willing to buy substantially. So here's some examples. Textbook has, they estimate the price elasticity demand for a whole bunch of different goods. We see things like sugar, milk, gas, residential natural gas. These all have very low elasticities of demand, so people are not very responsive to change in price. And things like gas, milk, we consider these necessities instead of luxuries. But look at some of these other goods that have extremely high price elasticities of demand, so they're really elastic. So like books from Barnes & Noble, why might the price elasticity demand be really high for books from Barnes & Noble? I mean, this is a few years old, so this is when people like still actually went there. Yeah, there's a lot of different bookstores you can go to. And then why do you think Amazon's is so low? Think of if you ever bought a book off Amazon. What do? You type in the title of the book, or you type in the ISBN number, and then a whole bunch of different books pop up from like all the different sellers. So there's a lot of competition on there. Does that sound right to you guys? Okay. How about post Raisin Bran? Why do you think that price elasticity demand is so high? People eat cereal all the time, right? Most people have for breakfast. So we think it's more of a necessity, so the price elasticity demand should be lower, right? Old people like it, right? Someone has to. See, for Raisin Bran, we're defining the market very narrowly. We're just looking at one particular brand of cereal. How many other brands of cereal that combine raisins and bran? Right? Yeah, it's not very popular. So if you want that kind of cereal for some reason, you're basically stuck with Raisin Bran. You're probably like what? One cheap knockoff. Because we define the market very narrowly for that one particular product. There's going to be a lot fewer substitutes that actually meet that need. So we're going to have a much higher estimated elasticity. So if you want to look at the price elasticity demand for breakfast cereals, the answer is going to depend on how you're defining the market. If you're looking at a particular brand, like we talked about with Raisin Bran, or a particular category of breakfast cereal. So if you want to break it down to say like healthy cereal versus like sugary cereal, or if we just look at breakfast cereal in general. The more broadly we define the market, the fewer close substitutes are available. Which is kind of odd. You'd think Raisin Bran would have very few substitutes. So if you would compare, say, the price elasticity demand for Raisin Bran with, let's say, Reese's Puffs. Who do you guys think would have higher price elasticity of demand?
I feel like a lot of them would be something like
Exactly. There's a lot more substitutes for recent costs. So they're going to have a much higher price elasticity demand than something like Raisin Bran, which has a lower, like smaller number of substitutes. And here's some estimations. You move down the list from that particular brand all the way up to just breakfast cereals in general. You see the price elasticity demand fall. Because there's fewer substitutes for breakfast cereal in general than there are for individual brands, you end up with a much lower price elasticity demand. So people are a lot less sensitive to price because there's fewer things you can buy that actually meets that need. All right, do you guys have any questions about the problems that we worked on last class or about the determinants of price elasticity of demand? It's not exactly the most riveting subject. Real quick, we'll look at the relationship between price elasticity of demand and then total revenue for a good. So again, if you're a business owner, you're trying to decide how to price your product, trying to determine if you raise your price, how many consumers are you going to lose? If you lower your price, you offer a discount, how many can you gain? And what's going to happen to your total revenue? Because again, at the end of the day, you're trying to make money. Remember, total revenue, this is the amount of funds received by the seller of a good or service. So basically, the price per unit times the number of units sold. So if you sell 100 units at $5 a piece, your total revenue is going to be $500, the amount of money you take in from that. So if you know, or if you can kind of estimate the price elasticity of demand for your product, you can answer these questions. Your firm, if you're trying to determine if you can cut your price and make more money, or if you raise your price, if you'll make more money, being able to estimate your price elasticity demand is going to help you figure out what to do. So if you have a product, and demand for your product is relatively price inelastic, consumers aren't super sensitive to a change in price. If you decrease your price, you're not going to gain that many additional consumers because they don't care about price. Maybe it's a necessity, maybe there's few substitutes, maybe it's super cheap compared to their budget. For whatever reason, they're not super sensitive to a change in price. So if you cut your price, you're going to get a few additional consumers, but you're not going to be able to compensate for the revenue you're losing. So overall, your revenue is going to go down. So if you're a firm with a price inelastic good, it doesn't make a lot of sense to lower your price. You'll just end up losing money. On the other hand, if the demand for your good is relatively elastic, so consumers are sensitive to the price of your product, if you decrease your price then, you can get a lot of additional consumers. And once they see that price change, a lot more people are going to be willing to buy it. So by getting a lot of additional consumers, that compensates for the revenue. So overall, your revenue is going to go up from cutting your price. So depending on the price elasticity of demand for your product, a decrease in price can either make you money or lose you money. So again, you want to at least be able to estimate if it's elastic or inelastic. You may not need to know the exact number. So here's an example of a good that's inelastic. So initially, if we're producing at price A, you're selling at $3, you're selling 1,000 units. You multiply the two of those together, your total revenue is going to be $3,000. Anything that's represented by this area, from $3 out to 1,000 units at point A. Now, if you decrease your price, say you cut it to $2.70, you're only going to increase the units sold to 1,050. So if you times $2.70 by 10,000 or 1,050, you end up with $2,835 of revenue. So your revenue is actually going to decrease. You think it can be 270 to this point B, over there to the 1,050. So compare that rectangle here to this rectangle, here to that rectangle. So when you decrease in price, you don't get that many more consumers. The quantity that you sell doesn't go up by that much. So you end up losing money. Initially, you made $3,000. Now you're only making $2,800 and change. So this decrease in price that you're doing, you think it's going to get you more consumers, more people are going to want to buy, actually ends up making you lose money. So in this case, you don't want to cut the price that you're selling the good at. On the other hand, let's look at an elastic good. So again, we're starting at a price of $3 and we're selling 1,000 units. So our total revenue in this case is going to be $3,000 again. If we decrease the price by 30 cents to $2.70 again, in this case with an elastic demand curve, we end up going from 1,000 units to 1,200 units. So 1,200 units times the $2.70, this new lower price, that ends up giving us a total revenue of $3,240. So in this case, this price change actually makes us more money. So by lowering the price, we're able to get more consumers, sell more goods, and end up with a higher total revenue. So if you're a firm and you're trying to determine what to do with price, whether to decrease it, whether to increase it, or whether to keep it the same, understanding price elasticity of demand and its effect on total revenue is important. So just being able to estimate whether consumers are sensitive to the price of the good or whether they're not sensitive to the price can be the difference between making money and losing money. I know there's no Econ majors in here, so you guys aren't going to care about theory very much, but this is one of the practical things you can take into business and actually use in like your day-to-day. If you have a lot of different majors or areas you're going into, besides just plain economics. The table of the relationship between the price elasticity and the revenue. It'll be a lot easier to just look at a curve like this instead of going through and memorizing all those. But they're there for you to check your work as you're working through the study guide. Okay. We're going to go through, well, we'll look at this and then we'll take a break. So elasticity across the linear demand curve is not going to be constant. What the price elasticity of demand is going to depend on where you are on the curve. So where you're pricing at how many units you're selling. So here we have a curve that when the price drops by $1, the quantity demanded is going to increase by $2. So when the price is high and the demand is low, so if we're on the top part of the demand curve up here, so high price, low quantity demanded, price elasticity of demand is going to be elastic. Because remember, we're working with percents here. And then when the quantity demanded is high and the price is low, so this end of the curve, it's going to be inelastic. And then right at that point in the middle, in this case, 4 units and $8. I'm sorry, $4 and 8 units. That's going to be unit elastic. So that's going to be where the price elasticity of demand equals 1. So when the good is elastic, remember that a price drop is going to increase the quantity demanded. So it's going to increase the total revenue. So we have a little graph of total revenue here. As we decrease the price for the elastic good, it's going to increase, increase, increase. Once we hit unit elastic, that's where we peak. And then for the inelastic good, as we cut the price, revenue is going to go down. So again, if you're a firm, you're trying to figure out where to price a good, whether to decrease the price or increase the price, it pays to know where you're at on the demand curve. So if you can estimate some kind of demand curve, you can figure out if you're selling a small quantity for a high price or a large quantity for a low price. You can figure out whether a price increase or price decrease is going to help make you more revenue. I'm not going to make you draw these graphs or anything for the exam. It's just a visual representation of what we're talking about, so you can, hopefully something that you can remember, or if you go into business yourself and you have to figure out, or you're asked, what should we do to price this good? You can use this to answer that question, try to figure it out. All right, so I've been talking for a while. Let's take a break. You guys have questions about the class, random stuff? Start a debate. Do something to wake up.
Let me take a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
I know, no one wants to talk. I mean, everything doing this stuff, right? I was thinking about going for a hike with one of my buddies this weekend. You guys have any suggestions where to go, like in the state?
Any direction.
You ever been to Ohio now?
No, I haven't.
I think it's in like Laurel Highlands, which is like I think an hour southwest of here. I want to say.
Yeah, I'll have fun after this, but
There's like, I mean, obviously it might be a little too cold, but there's like a stream or like a river through there if you want to go swimming. And then there's also tons of areas to like hike throughout.
It's pretty sweet.
good life path there. Water rafting.
Yeah.
You can whitewater raft there?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
In Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's like 8 hours. It's all waterproof.
Wow. I didn't even know that was like an option around here.
Pretty fun. Yeah, yeah.
You been to one of Great Falls?
No.
Water, you never went water rafting in Great Falls?
No.
That's fun.
I didn't know there were like places that do that in Pennsylvania.
No, I mean like Virginia.
Oh.
Michigan, that's good.
No, I also haven't been there either.
You never went out to like, Williams Trail, any of those places?
No. I didn't have a car most of the time I was down there, so.
You see why you can like that, you can there. You find your way.
Did you get on your fantasy?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I ended up with the 6th pick. Instead of doing like how we finished last year, they randomized it. So I got the 6th pick again. Let me pull it up. So we're playing with 2 quarterbacks. So I got Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford. You don't like Matthew Stafford?
I like Deshaun too. I like myself.
Their offensive line sucks,
Yeah, terrible.
but he still gets points. This isn't like real football. It's just stats. He gets his rushing yards and his rushing touchdowns. Matthew Stafford was on pace for like one of his best seasons before he got injured last year. Also, I like him because I went to a conference in the Bahamas like a year and a half ago, and him and his family were on the beach in front of me. So I was going to go up and say hi to him. I'm like, I don't want to bother him. So I'll walk down in the water, splash in the water a little bit, then I'll come back out. And like as I walk past him, make eye contact. He goes, oh my God, you're Matthew Stafford. So I go down the water. Like the second I get in, him and his family leaves.
Yeah, they call him, just buddy, let's get out of here.
Probably. I'm like,
Been staring at us for the last half an hour.
missed my chance to meet a famous person. But as I'm walking by, he left the little coconut he was drinking out of there. So I just grabbed that and took it home. So I had this coconut drink sitting in my bedroom.
That's kind of slightly weird. Is that right next to the shrine?
Well, I took like a bunch of like seashells and rocks and a bunch of stuff from down there.
Is that legal? I don't know, there's some places that don't allow you to do that. You're not allowed to take like,
They didn't say anything in the airport about it.
Russia's really tough.
About like no taking shit from the ocean.
Yeah.
Who's your wide receiver?
All right, so Will Fuller. I have Cortland Sutton, who gets injured yesterday, like literally the day after the draft in practice. And DK Metcalf.
That's one of the scariest you can do.
I know.
6'9".
After watching him like late in the season, like the playoffs last year, like I had to make sure I grabbed him.
He's a big 6'9".
Kind of back to the other topic, but I had to look at where it was. In the summer, you should go to like Rock Run. It's in Williamsport, PA. It's like 2 hours from here.
Rock
You like
Run?
do cliff jumps and stuff, and you can just swim. And you can hike too, but
Where is it?
it's like 30 minutes after.
What is it?
Rock Run.
Oh, that's 5 minutes from my house. You better stop by and have a beer and say hello.
Wait, where is this exactly?
No, nowhere.
Yeah. It's not near where I live, or else I would have a reference point.
Well, near you. Where?
Yeah, so it's outside of Williamsport. It's out Old Road, PA 87. You keep going, you literally turn into like a dirt road and you're right there.
Is that like near Wallace Run?
No, you're about 30 miles too far.
Doesn't Wallace Run run into?
Yeah,
Okay.
but that's on the closer side also,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
PA Grand Canyon too. I don't know if that's the actual name, that's just what I call it.
Yeah, I've gone up there before, but I've never like hiked and stuff.
Yeah,
There's a professor who used to work here. He used to hike like the whole thing and like camp in there and everything.
yeah, that place is nice. You can like hike that trail that takes you up to like the lookout. That lookout's insane.
It's beautiful. Alright, this is good. I got some good suggestions. Skip that. I do want to talk about two other demand elasticities real quick. These, again, won't be on the exam. There's not even, I like delete them from the slideshow. But other things to pay attention to or to think about. So the first is the cross-price elasticity of demand. What it is the effect of a price change on one product on the sales of another product. So if you're selling a good, competitor sells a substitute good, if their price increases, more people are going to buy your good if your price stays the same. Now their good's relatively more costly. Likewise, if they drop the price of their good, more people are going to buy their good and fewer are going to buy yours. So it's important for businesses to know how much a change in a competitor's price is going to affect their sales.
I feel like Apple could like charge whatever they want, like even compared to Samsung, and people would still rather buy it.
Yeah, they probably have a very low price, cross-price elasticity demand.
Yeah.
'Cause I buy an Android, but most people I know love their iPhone, and they wouldn't buy an Android or like another operating system, another kind of phone, like no matter what the price was. So if you can specialize your good in some way or offer something better for your good, you can have a very low cross-price elasticity demand, like someone like Apple would have. But if you're like a gas station selling gas, there's a ton of other gas stations out there selling very similar gas. So one of their price changes, even a slight price change, is going to decrease your demand by a lot. And then complements are going to have the opposite relationship. So if there's a good, like, I don't know, hot dogs and hot dog buns, or Coronas and limes that go together, if the price of one increases, the quantity demanded of the complement is going to decrease. The price of hot dogs go up, fewer people are going to buy hot dog buns. So it's also important not just to look at the price elasticity of demand for your good, but how the change in price is going for another good will affect the demand for your good. And the other is the income elasticity of demand. So that's the responsiveness of the quantity of demand to a change in consumer income. So when income increases, consumers' income increases, you expect they're going to buy more of a good. So you expect demand to increase. So if you have a normal good, that's true. If you have an inferior good, so if you have ramen noodles or ground beef with a super high fat content, things that people, when they have money, they don't like to buy those. They're going to have a negative income elasticity of demand. Where people's income goes up, they're going to demand less of ramen noodles. There's things called luxury goods. When the price increases of these goods, the demand actually increases. So if people's income increases, if their income increases, the quantity demanded of those luxury goods are going to increase even more than for normal goods. So those are just two other types of elasticities that we can pay attention to, that firms should pay attention to. So they help them determine how to price a product and how to maximize their revenue. Now moving on to the price elasticity of supply. This is going to be fairly similar to price elasticity of demand, except instead of looking at consumers, we'll be looking at firms and their willingness to change the quantity demanded or the quantity supplied to the market. So price elasticity of demand, the responsiveness of a quantity supplied to a change in price. So we're going to measure this by dividing the percentage change in the quantity supplied by the percentage change in the product's price. So basically the same as the price elasticity of demand. Yeah, so here we have demand. So literally, just change quantity demanded to quantity supplied. And you've got price elasticity of supply. And again, we're going to use the midpoint formula instead of using just the generic percent one, because again, the percent, whether you increase the price or decrease the price, you'll get a different percent and end up with a different price elasticity. So all the same sort of caveats, the price elasticity of supply. So basically what price elasticity of supply depends on is the ability and the willingness for firms to alter the quantity that they produce as there's a change in price. So remember, as supply curves slope upwards, because supply curve can be thought of the marginal cost of the firms in production. So the more, the higher the price that firms can receive for a good or service, the more they'll be willing to produce. Because over time, the more expensive it gets to produce more and more units of a good. So now if we're looking at what the price elasticity of supply is, the time period we're looking at is the most important thing. So if the price of grapes doubled overnight, for some reason, people suddenly started loving grapes and wanting to eat grapes constantly, farmers couldn't increase their output immediately. So the initial price elasticity supply is going to be close to zero. It takes a long time to plant these fields, to allow the grapes to grow, to actually pick them and get them to the market. So in the very short run, there's almost no price elasticity of supply. You're not going to be able to respond at all to a change. But over time, over a long period of time, over several seasons, farmers can plant more fields of grapes. They can buy fields next to their property that say grow wheat or grow another crop, begin growing grapes. So that over several years, over a few seasons, the price elasticity of supply is going to rise because more and more grapes are able to be grown. They're able to bring more to the market. By the same token, imagine a factory. Price elasticity of supply in the short run is going to be higher than it is for grapes. You can have people work overtime. You can, if you only run 1 or 2 shifts, you can start running multiple shifts. Have people work, weekends, whatever. But it's not going to be very elastic. Again, over a longer period of time, you can expand your plant, you can buy more machines, you can hire more workers. So the price elasticity of supply is going to increase over time. Yeah, so another example is oil producers. They can't change their output very quickly. It takes a long time to be able to get oil out of the ground. The entire process from finding the oil fields, to actually going down and drilling, to hitting the oil, pulling it up, refining it, and then eventually selling it on the market. So if demand increases, especially if it increases suddenly, so they're not prepared for the increase, the price is going to rise substantially. So we have the supply curve. Again, it's a steeper slope because it's inelastic. So say the demand curve shifts out, the price is going to increase pretty substantially. So we go from $80 to $140 when the quantity demand goes from 80 to 84. This increase in price is going to help ration the oil, so people end up using less oil, more of it to go around, an increase in demand in the short run. But then if there's a recession, people's income drops, there's going to be a decrease in demand for oil. Demand curve shifts to the left, and we see a pretty substantial drop from just a small decrease in the quantity demand. Oil producers can't adjust their output quickly. It takes a long time to be able to do that. So we see the price increase and decrease pretty dramatically. I was really hoping they were going to show a chart of gas prices over time. But if you look at it, it's constantly dropping up and down because they can't alter their supply that easily. We'll end there for today. We'll pick up with some extreme examples next class and then go over the review.